So Lightspark, what
Yes.
was it just so obvious to you that this is what you had to do?
Yes. Because once you have that unshakable conviction that Bitcoin is the only asset and network that you can build a truly open, interoperable, cheap, 24/7 real-time settlement payment protocol for the internet on, then that's it. So, and then you don't have much of a choice. It's like, okay, you want Bitcoin. Bitcoin on layer 1 is slow to move and expensive for everyday use and everyday transactions. So Lightning is the only solution that actually can scale with privacy and scalability and low cost. And so we embarked on this journey of helping Lightning become adopted in a more mainstream way and address a lot of the usability and operational overhead challenges of being on the Lightning network. And so that's what we've been focused on.
And so what are those issues?
So a channel-based payment system is fairly counterintuitive because people and companies are used to having an interface and being able to push a payment. And if you're trying to do that on Lightning, you first have to have liquidity locked up in channels, find out other nodes to connect to, lock up that liquidity so that they can reciprocate, and you have inbound liquidity that is set up for you so you can receive payments. Then every single time you have a payment that goes through your channels, they get unbalanced. You need to redeploy liquidity between channels and do all kinds of different things that are really not intuitive. And that require, even for large, sophisticated companies, teams of people managing nodes and doing these things. And also the tooling for Lightning is not that good. And so, for instance, route finding, when you're about to send a transaction for a specific amount, finding the appropriate route that is going to result in a success of your money arriving at its destination, and not failing, and not be the victim of crazy latency along the way, is also super important, especially when you're trying to compete with other payment systems that are high availability and used at levels that are way higher than what Lightning is used today. And so we built a lot of technology around this. Lightspark Connect is our node management system that enables you to spin up your own node. We don't have the keys. You own your keys. We can't move funds on your behalf. So it's your own node. And then Lightspark Predict is a software that runs across our entire infrastructure and gets a map of the entire Lightning network, where the liquidity is, how nodes are performing or not performing, the latency of each of these nodes, availability, uptime, et cetera. And then with this data set, we are able to find the best routes for every single transactions that are sent across our stack, but then also dynamically deploy liquidity across the entire network in such a way that our clients don't ever have to worry about liquidity on the network. They don't have to worry about channel rebalancing. They don't have to worry about finding nodes to connect to and open channels and close channels with. They have their funds available, whether they're in channels or on their L1 wallet, on their nodes. They can do all of these things seamlessly. And so we've built a way for exchanges and wallets to have an enterprise-grade entry point into Lightning where they plug in and they have their outbound liquidity in their node, and they have SDKs and APIs that they can embed in their own infrastructure, and then they can send and receive payments reliably, period. So we've removed all of the complexity from Lightning, basically.
And so when you've built Predict, you've built it in a way to find the liquidity and be able to find the most reliable ways to route payments. But are you finding the most reliable within the limitations of how much liquidity exists within the network, or are you able to even solve that? Are you able to add liquidity if it's required? You are.
So we do the latter. So when there is not enough liquidity, then we can dynamically, in real time, deploy liquidity across the network to ensure that transactions are going to be successful.
So in some ways, because we've always considered that Lightning is for smaller transactions, and I don't think I've ever sent more than $300-400 in a single transaction on Lightning Network, whereas on the base chain, I've sent much higher.
Right.
Have you essentially then removed the limitation on the size of individual transactions?
Yes, we have, and also what we can do is we can help our clients predict where they're going to have more volume over time and gradually build customized models for each and every one of our clients. So you can see, for instance, exchanges that have patterns with specific endpoints. And so we deploy liquidity and open specific channels with endpoints that are going to enable them to have unlimited transaction sizes with specific parties.
And is that literally unlimited? It can go as high as you want.
I mean, it could, in theory, as long as, one way for sure. The other way, it also will depend on who, is it a direct channel with someone, or is it a channel that has to go through a series of nodes, and in which case you'll have limitations. So it really depends. But we can configure, that's one of the beauties of Lightning, is that you can configure the network, your node, who your node is connected with, in a really customized way.
Yeah.
And so some players only want to open channels with specific players. Some players want to have as many channels as possible with as many nodes as possible, which is, by the way, not a recipe for success generally, because a lot of nodes that have liquidity are not performant or are not up when you need them to be. And there are all kinds of other parameters that will ensure that a transaction is successful on a specific route. And so we've dealt with a lot of that complexity. And as such, the interesting thing is when we talked to exchanges, neobanks that have Bitcoin, wallet providers, and that didn't have Lightning or weren't on the Lightning network, their main complaint was, first of all, is it worth us integrating? Is there enough activity to justify the engineering cycles? And then as part of that evaluation, they went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, what does it take for me to spin up a node, maintain the node, deploy the liquidity, open these channels, rebalance these channels, manage the updates and all of that stuff. And the answer has always been no, because it doesn't compute, right? The opportunity is unknown. And the cost in terms of deployment and operationalization of the thing is just, doesn't make sense. And so and it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? Because if no one does, then the network can't take off. And so you'll always be in this position where it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense for us to integrate. So we've at least addressed one part of that two-part puzzle, which is now it's really easy. You can do it really quickly, reliably. And so you can now offer this service to your clients, which is faster, cheaper Bitcoin movement. So that's kind of step one, make it really easy. Step two is, okay, now you have a lot of players. And so how do you create a great consumer experience so that consumers start using Lightning in a more seamless way? And so there are a number of problems that you need to resolve for that, that we're actively working on. So for instance, today, it's a two-player experience, right? You can't send money to someone randomly. They have to generate an invoice. They have to send you an invoice, and so it's this long string of text or a QR code that you need to capture, and then you can send a payment. So that's kind of not really great. So there are a number of different approaches to identity on top of Lightning that we're looking at and building on. And then,
is that LNURL, or are you doing it a different way?
Yeah, LNURL is actually really interesting in a number of ways. It's easy to implement. It's got a lot of good capabilities. There are other proposals that are even more decentralized that I think will come to life, in the next couple of years that will be also interesting. But addressing is really important. And then you have another part of the problem, which is, okay, now you have addressing, you have all these exchanges. Do people actually want to transact in Bitcoin? Do they want to transact in other currencies? How do you make Bitcoin the net settlement asset between currencies? And I think, at the end of the day, if people can use good currencies that they already have, they already know, there's no cognitive load in you learning about the new currency and its volatility and where it's accepted, not accepted. But you can now send to anyone you want 24/7 cheaply and reliably, then people will want that. And so that's, all the next phases of what we're building are meant to address this.
So you solved the issue of liquidity, but does that get solved if both parties are using Lightspark?
No. It's,
Oh.
So the way it works is that because of Predict, we're able to map routes. The vast majority of the Lightning Network is not, and that's not what we want as well, running on Lightspark stack, right? Otherwise, it's kind of defeating the purpose of decentralization. So we hope to have a decent market share, but other players are really required to do their job as well. And so, as far as sending goes, for sending transactions, we're always able to deploy liquidity along the route, only connect to nodes that are going to be high availability, good performance, have the right liquidity deployed within these channels so that we have good paths to the most common endpoints of the network. And so the vast majority of these endpoints are not on Lightspark stack. And there are all kinds of different endpoints, whether it's custodial wallets, non-custodial endpoints, et cetera. So we aim to enable our clients to send successfully across the entire network.